And so I am very excited to introduce to you today Mayia Warren. And as Mayia makes her way up here, we had dinner last night, so I told her that I have her bio, and I said it is going to be literally the blind leading the blind, because I'm reading her bio, so there you go. We are so excited to have Mayia. She is an award-winning indivisible disabilities, albinism, and chronic illness advocate and philanthropreneur. That's a new word for me, philanthropreneur. I did that pretty well. And she utilizes the vehicles of creative communication, traditional artistry, media, music, writing, and digital content to establish effective individual initiatives within the disability arena. As an individual who navigates multiple indivisible chronic conditions, she endeavors to use her life experiences as a tool for impact. Her artistic abilities have been recognized and used throughout her education, or has been used as a form of education and entertainment, representing different aspects of her personal and community experiences over the past 11 years. And when I read this the first time and then I met Mayia last night, it talks as though she's been doing this for a long time. She is truly going to be one of those that can say, I've been doing this since I was 12, and be true about that. So she has accomplished a great deal. Through her platform of the Better Not Bitter podcast, Mayia provides a space for individuals living with various medical conditions, disabilities, and chronic illnesses to have their life experience heard. The initial, let me say this, the first time I heard her podcast, I was blown away. She has an eloquence about the conversations that she has, and I was cracking up because as a person with low vision, I could so relate to some of the stories. So we had a great time last night at dinner, and now is the opportunity for Mayia to be heard. So join me in welcoming Mayia Warren.
Good afternoon. So as it's been stated, my name is Mayia Warren, and I am an advocate among many other things, and it is my pleasure to be before you all today. Special thank you to DisabilityIN, ECAC, and all the organizations that I have the privilege of collaborating with. Thank you. And so today, we've had the pleasure of hearing various perspectives regarding disability inclusion. I myself have 4 invisible disabilities, and this month actually marks Invisible Disabilities Awareness Month, with October 16th to the 22nd being a specific week designated to raise awareness. So among many other things, I'd like to kind of highlight some statistics regarding invisible disabilities. Someone mentioned earlier today that 1 billion people on the planet have some form of disability. That's about 1 in 9. In America, about 42 million Americans have some sort of severe disability. And in terms of the grand scheme of the disability community, 97% of all disabilities are non-apparent or invisible. That means 3% have some sort of marker for mobility-related disability. And my question to all of you is, what is your purpose? In light of the statistics and the barriers that people with disabilities face, what is your purpose for incorporating DEI into your organization? Many times in the work that I get to do, I evaluate different systems and organizations. And one of the things that stands out to me is the approach that entities have towards diversity. Many times, diversity means not including people with disabilities or Black Americans, especially Black Americans with disabilities in general. And so upon analysis, there's two primary approaches. There's a people approach to diversity and inclusion, and then there's a systems approach. A systems approach adds to an already sludge-filled and cluttered structure of organizations and institutions, not evaluating most basic practices like application processes, interview structure, all of this before hiring even begins. A people approach designs programs by looking at what already exists and eliminating barriers from programs that already exist. It, instead of adding to clutter, it declutters the systems that are already there with the intent to engage people and meet them where they are. So if everybody can do me a favor, take a minute and close your eyes. I know it's, after lunch and we probably already got some sort of fullitis going on, but just close your eyes and try not to go to sleep. So imagine with me, as you are, no title, whether you're a parent, professional, government official, let's strip away all the titles and the labels that we have adorned and consider your humanity. That is the one thing all of us have in common right now. The ability to have breath in our lungs, the ability to see from whatever angle, whether it be with our minds, our heart, or our emotions, or with our very eyes. We have the commonality of humanity. You can open your eyes now. The one thing that is missing from diversity, equity, inclusion is people. Many times I get asked, how do we get people with disabilities in this organization or in this company? How do we get people with disabilities to come to this program? How do we get them to engage and participate? And my question to that question is always, why do you want to get people to do anything? It's not about getting people to achieve an outcome that you believe is desirable. What matters is creating an engaging environment, a safe culture. Ultimately, the foundation of your organization as it stands, if you examine it, if you think upon it from the top down, whatever level you're at, are there holes in your current foundation that if you were to even bring people with disabilities to a greater capacity or at all into your organization, will they fall through because you haven't addressed problems that already exist? If you have current employees without disabilities complaining that they feel burnout or unheard or disregarded, or they have a problem communicating with higher ups because there's no transparency in the organization, why would it be beneficial to bring people with disabilities into that structure? It wouldn't. It wouldn't make sense. And so if anyone's ever played Jenga, the object of the game is not to knock the tower down, but at some point, someone with a sly strategic plan is going to pull one block out that causes the tower to be just that much unstable. And so what do? You add that block to the top. You add a block to an already weakened foundation. My quest or my goal today is to help you to see what is already at your disposal. What are you already using? What are you already doing? What programs are you already navigating that need to be improved before you even elaborate or build upon diversity? Does your definition of diversity become more robust, or is it actually excluding people? Many times in the spaces I'm in, as I said before, it excludes people with disabilities. And unfortunately, as an advocate, one of the things that I observe is DEI has become a fad. And for someone navigating disability my entire life, fads upset me. You know why? It's this cyclical effect of something becomes popular, people flock to it, they build programs upon that weak foundation of popularity, and then when that fad is over, people move on. And who's left to deal with the ramifications of that? People with disabilities. And so what becomes the quest is building a sustainable foundation. How do we do that? Even if you already have a program related to disability inclusion, you have to evaluate what's already within your disposal and the very structure of how you initiated that. When I was in my time at UNCG, I'm a Spartan, go Spartans. And one of the things that I learned, I took a course called Physical Activity for Underrepresented Groups. And so my background, much of it is in program design. And one of the statements that has stood with me for forever by my professor is this: inclusion must be a priority at the onset, the very birthing of a program, in order for it to be truly inclusive. So if you have a DEI program and you don't have anyone with disabilities in that room where it's happening, those decisions are being made, that's not disability inclusion. You know, many people fall into this trap of allyship at times, where it's like, oh, wow, well, you know, I'm supporting and I'm doing this, that, and the third, but are you amplifying the voices of people with disabilities who are actually facing those challenges, or are you taking up space where you really need to open your ears and listen? I heard many people in the ERG session ask, like, how can we be more engaging? The key to engaging is meeting people where they are. So if people show up to your group or your company and they're not self-disclosing, first of all, you have to gain their trust. There's a theory that I genuinely love and appreciate, and that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the bottom tier of that pyramid consists of, you know, our basic needs: food, water, shelter, all those things. The second tier has to do with belonging. If I, as a person with a disability, walk into the doors of your company, can I tell from the culture that I belong there? Because ultimately it comes down to culture, starts from the top down. So if we have leaders who care, then we build a culture where employees care. It sets the tone, the environment, so that it becomes less of, oh my gosh, I got to make another space for this accommodation, or oh my gosh, this student or this employee is now coming to me with this issue I've never faced before. It becomes less about a fear of the unknown because you lack experience in the area of disability, and it becomes more about a teaching moment, creating a space where people feel comfortable with saying, hey, I'm not trying to tell you all my business, as I like to say, but I'm having an issue with this, but I'm willing to teach you how to accommodate me. Is there a space for that in your company? And I can tell you now, if you look at employees without disabilities, that's a marker for if there's a space for that scenario. Because if your employees without disabilities do not feel safe enough to communicate, oh, wow, I had a family member pass, I have this conflict. If they're not able to communicate and they don't have disabilities, how much harder do you think it's going to be for someone with the disabilities? Because I'm going to let y'all in on a little secret. As someone who navigates multiple disabilities, and I have cohorts within the space, we pay attention. We watch how you treat other people with disabilities. We watch the looks on your face. For those of us who can see looks on the face, we pay attention to your body movements, the tone of your voice, the size, your posture, all of those things. And behind all of those things is a term I like to affectionately call attitudinal barriers. So a lot of times I've been in spaces where, because I love program design and creating solutions and removing barriers, and I'll say, hey, can we do this? Create this particular solution to this problem. And it's like, oh, I don't know if we have the budget for that. Then I come up with a less impactful budget decision. Well, I don't know if people will respond to that. You know, and many times it's excuses, but behind that is multiple things. So there's an obligatory response. So many people in the DEI space feel, oh, I have to do this. because I don't want to, deal with lawsuits, or I have to do this because maybe you feel a sense of responsibility that's not necessarily your own. And so it becomes this misguided source of motivation, and now you're burning out because your program isn't getting off the ground at the speed or the pace that you desire it to. Then there's performative. Performative reaction to DEI is, oh, wow, look at me. Like, I'm doing this work and I feel so great on behalf of this community instead of alongside this community. And language matters. Language matters. It's very easy to step into a savior mentality when designing diversity, equity, inclusion programs, because it does make you feel good to help people. But if your motivation for helping people is so you can look like an effective organization, or you can look like you are succeeding, or you can look like you're dotting all the lines and crossing every T, all of those things, those are fleeting sources of motivation. And often what happens is when the fad is over, the motivation ends. The fire dies out. And then there's the last approach, which is rare to find. But I've seen it. I've seen it from organizations like ECAC and DisabilityIN and a few others, and that's the approach of caring. When I had us close our eyes and think of our humanity, dropping all of our titles and responsibilities, I did that for a reason. Because as humans, it's innate in us to care. But in many ways, we've been desensitized by our fast-paced society and lifestyle, so that when challenges like disability come to the forefront, we're already burnt out, and we're like grasping at straws for solutions. But the difference between a caring approach and the other two I mentioned is that a caring approach knows when to sit back and listen. It knows when to engage in community. It knows when to amplify the voices of its employees with disabilities. It knows when it's time to set your opinion down and actually take notes from your employees that are communicating their different experiences. For those of you who don't know, I came in here on what's called a smart crutch. And so one of the caveats of one of my conditions is vertigo, vestibular migraine. Right now, I'm not using it. Many people would see that and be like, oh, she's spanking, she's tripping, so to speak. But the nature of that is me having a dynamic disability, or a set of dynamic disabilities, that from moment to moment, my level of energy, balance, my physiology changes in the blink of an eye. As an employer, are you willing to accommodate employees who navigate dynamic disabilities, employees who are ambulatory mobility aid users, meaning they may have the ability to walk, but they need that device to go just that much further? Are you willing to create a flexible schedule where your patients or your employees with chronic fatigue or chronic pain have the ability to sit down instead of saying, oh, no pain, no gain. I got to compete with this employee without disabilities just to make ends meet? These are all questions that are important because it forces us to be self-aware from an organizational standpoint. And that lack of self-awareness is actually what causes diversity, equity, inclusion to be just simply a fad and nothing sustainable. So the foundation of what you all do and what we do in the space of disability should be built upon caring. When employees, regardless of disability or not, recognize that their employers, CEOs, executive directors care, there is an enthusiasm that trickles down like you wouldn't believe, because it becomes part of what we do. The very nature of culture is a set of practices or ideals or colloquialisms that a group of people or a social setting adhere to. Is your culture one of inclusion? And not just inclusion from a gender identity perspective or a intergenerational perspective, but from a disability and ethnicity perspective? And is it ready to handle intersectionality? Is it ready to have spaces where employees and employers can have crucial conversations? You know, the hard conversations about issues like what happened with George Floyd, because better believe, Black individuals with disabilities, we felt that as well. Are you ready to handle situations where you have an employee who was late because public transportation failed? It wasn't a failure on their part from a scheduling perspective, but transportation tends to be clunky at times. And then there is the subject of mental health. People with disabilities, regardless of visible or invisible capacity, are 5 times as likely to navigate anxiety, depression, and such. Do you know some of those factors? And because I can't see, you can shout out maybe a potential factor. Anybody want to take a guess? It's okay to get it wrong. Bingo. And that's just one of the many factors: employment, transportation. I can tell you, I facilitate and I initiated a youth empowerment group with an organization, and we had a session, and it ran overtime because of the passion regarding the session over the clunkiness and inaccessibility of things like Uber and Lyft. Those are just some, and then you have things like the stress of when you get a job, how to self-disclose. I hear that term many times today, and from the perspective of someone who is a young adult with disabilities, self-disclosure is something that many people struggle with as a result of, unfortunately, big T transition not being addressed soon enough. So there's an influx of individuals, even older adults at times, who feel uncomfortable asking for help. And there are times when I feel uncomfortable, even as an advocate, because it forces you to step out of yourself and recognize that you need assistance. As employers, as employees, as individuals, as human beings, are you really ready for when the unexpected happens with someone's symptoms or circumstances to assist in that regard? Because I can tell you another aspect, one of the barriers to people with disabilities applying in the first place is they don't want to deal with people who don't know how to engage with people with disabilities. I hear that all the time. I had an individual who works at a company specifically designed to hire, so all the employees have some sort of vision impairment. And I was talking to her, and I was like, hey, do you want to go somewhere else? You want to apply somewhere else? Because she was like, yeah, I would like to go somewhere else. I feel like it's time for a change. So I helped her find some listings and whatnot, and 2 weeks, 3 weeks later go by, she didn't apply. And she literally was like, I didn't apply because I don't know if I'm going to get the same level of accommodation there that I did with this particular organization. Those are barriers that keep people from applying in the first place, let alone even looking at a listing or considering what is available and what is out there. And so finally, I just want to add that looking around the room with my limited amount of vision, because I am also visually impaired, I can tell that individuals in here care. They have desire to fill a need and meet a need that they see is available. My challenge to you is to fill that need with the people that will actually be impacted by that solution that you're trying to create. Because if people with disabilities are not at the table where these conversations are having, if they're not included, but you're making something for them, that's not advocacy. In many cases, I hear the language of, yeah, I advocate for people with disabilities. I urge you, because language matters. It's better to empower people. So it's better to articulate that I advocate with people who have disabilities. As parents, you co-advocate with your children, because people with disabilities are people first. And we will rise to the standard or the expectation that you give us in an equitable capacity, a term that I because I hate the term reasonable accommodation. And here's why, because as I said many times already, we are all human. So what is reasonable to us might not be reasonable to someone else. So there's too much wiggle room, and so I prefer the term equitable accommodation. So now it puts the responsibility on the person providing the accommodation to recognize the legal and moral implications of providing something that allows someone to perform their job. And finally, I'm going to leave it open for any questions, thoughts, or concerns, as I always say.
Hello. As you were attending UNCG, how were those accommodations helpful for you? What did they do to help make your transition into college a successful one?
So that's a great question, and multiple things set me up, but it started before I even stepped foot on campus. So the Division of Services for the Blind has a program called Savvy. It's a camp for the blind and visually impaired. And so I attended there, and they have 3 programs. Each year you go back: Youth in Transition, World of Work, where you get your first work experience with a stipend, and then the last program is College Prep. I was in that program the summer I graduated from high school. And while I had been a self-advocate all my life, very proficient in it, there I was exposed to the realities of what I would be navigating. Things like one of my mentors specifically told me this, because I can do the most sometimes. She was like, don't go to college acting cute, trying to take 15 credit hours per semester like your peers. And I tried to do it anyway my freshman year. And guess what happened? I learned my lesson. And so learning to not compare yourself as a student, learning how to learn again, because with a disability, every class you take, every semester, you're learning how to learn. So the same way you adapt to, let's just say, calculus your freshman year, you're not going to adapt the same way to biomechanics or physics. And so learning that prior to getting to college, in addition to orientation and mobility and all those things, helped me. And then when I got to college, ORS was the specific name for UNCG, Office of Accessibility Resources. And one of the things that they were very intentional in is making sure they knew that they were available to me. And I think that was one of the main things that impacted me, because I've heard many stories of individuals with disabilities who go to college and they're like, my resource office or my accessibility office is just not available. I can never get someone on the phone. They have an attitude. I didn't experience that at UNCG, thankfully. And so some of the accommodations I had were extended time, separate setting testing. I even had a stipulation in there for arrival time to class. Because of my vision impairment, I need to be safe when crossing the streets, and some of the streets on the campus are like main streets in Greensboro. So I had a stipulation that if I'm a few minutes late, it's because of my vision impairment, because a lot of factors impact that. And in addition to what ORS did to assist me, there was a program at UNCG called TRIO. And it is one of the greatest things ever. I would not have graduated without it. and it's basically student support services specifically designed for first-generation college graduates and students with disabilities. And so it has 3 primary functions. It has academic skills, so they teach you how to learn and adapt and study. Then it has tutoring as well as counseling. And all their tutors and counselors are specifically trained to work with students with disabilities. And through that, I found community, mentorship, and I just found a place where if I was extremely stressed out, especially during college, the progression of the chronic illnesses I lived with were increasing. And so I could go there and be like, man, like I'm struggling to just get up in the morning, let alone turn on Zoom and be present for 75 minutes. So those are just some of the things that helped me.
Hi, Maya. My name is Hannah Strack, and before I say anything, I just have to give it up for you for being such a dynamic speaker, someone who really, yeah. I see that artistry and how you speak and command a room, so I just wanted to give that up to you first. The big question that I have for you, as well as truly everybody else in this room, is understanding the challenges of, or what, I think a second how I want to word this, because the question I have are like the challenges faced by the companies in moving forward with some of these programs, because what I'm hearing a lot of today is the benefits are so obvious, truly. And I was curious about, like, what are some of those barriers, or what are some of the things that companies are saying, well, we can't do it because of time, we can't do it because of money, we can't, X, Y, and Z. So are there, or do you know of different case studies where the money was put down for this particular accessibility program and it came back tenfold this other way? Or what are some of the things? I'm asking multiple questions, and just like pick whichever one works best for you.
So what I hear is, one, how can companies exercise empathy instead of sympathy, and how can they be effective in addressing barriers that people with disabilities face?
Yes, or even what are the common things that you hear of, we can't do it because of X?
Yeah. So firstly, when it comes to individuals and employers responding to me with, oh, we can't do this because of X, Y, Z, you already stated the 2 answers I get. It's because of time and or money. And that always frustrates me, because when people say we can't do this because of time and money, that means they have a linear process or expectation of how the outcome should come to fruition. So that's an issue, because that tells me you're not even willing to take steps to be innovative in how to solve this problem. So first you have to be flexible and say, okay, this is how I'm interpreting getting this outcome. People with disabilities and other people in the group, what are some solutions we can come to make this outcome effective and come about? Because I'm I'm the kind of person, I irritate people sometimes. Because people are like, oh, no, we can't do that. I'm like, but really? And even especially as someone who does graphic design, digital content, podcasting, I'm a YouTuber, do video editing, all of that. I have people sometimes, they're like, oh, well, we want to spread the word about this program, but we're not getting interaction in our newsletters or on social media. And I'm like, make a video. Put some music behind it. Nice graphics. Doesn't have to be very long. And usually I get the response of, oh, I didn't think about that. And so that's the beauty of having a team that is diverse, from an ethnic standpoint, from a disability standpoint, from an intergenerational standpoint, because if you tell me no, chances are I'm called to be here to help you create a solution so that can be a yes. You see what I'm saying? There's a lot of cost-effective ways to bring about programming. The issue is we often have a fixed mindset of how that program should look Hope that answers your question.
I'm Mayia. This is Philip Woodward. I'm a system change manager at the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities. I saw you at the virtual ADA celebration, so it's great to see you here in person today.
Thank you.
I want to quote you on something that you said this afternoon. Fill that need with the people who will actually be impacted by that solution that you are trying to create. And this is a continuation of the panel discussion this morning. But at the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities, we're trying to hire more people who have lived experience. And typically in state government in the past, human resources officers are looking for experience, meaning work experience in a job. And we're trying to help them understand that living with a disability and growing up and being a person with a disability should count toward that experience, however many number of years they might be looking for. So I just want to say thank you for pointing these things out. How if there's a barrier anywhere, whether it involves people with disabilities or doesn't involve people with disabilities, they might have the creativity and the talent to help that company or that business solve that. And so we want to look for that lived experience out there that can contribute to finding the solution. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Paul, I believe you said, for sharing that. And I want to elaborate on that. It's very easy. So I live with hypermobility spectrum disorder, chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic migraine disease, and 3 variations of it, in addition to IBS and having a vision impairment and living with albinism, but albinism is not a disability, it's just a medical condition. So that's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, so a grocery list of things, and I have a grocery list of doctors and medicines and treatments, alternatives and prescriptions, all those things. And so what happens when you're navigating any disability, let alone multiple, and them being invisible, is you internalize ableism. And those are attitudes, structures, and systems that favor people without disabilities. So you internalize all the attitudes. You internalize the, oh, we got to do this for you again. You internalize the, we can't do that, or we internalize, that costs too much money. You internalize all of that in addition to societal expectations for your cohort. So whether you're a child, a youth, a young adult, an adult, older adult, you internalize all those expectations that come with those milestones. And so you become in the position where you start to invalidate your own life experience. I'll give you an example. I've been to many a doctor, and one of the first times that a physician told me they could do nothing for me, it made me feel like I was broken. Because their lack of knowledge, they internalized that and put it on me as that I was the problem, instead of admitting that they didn't have the resources or the knowledge base to treat me and then give me resources that would actually aid for my betterment. And so that happens in the workplace as well. As this gentleman stated, like, there are creative ways that people with disabilities can participate, but because people have a fixed mindset of what the inaction of a job looks like or participation in a specific task looks like, they will never know or experience those creative solutions. I'll give you an example. For 2.5 years, I was a graphic designer for a church, social media manager. So I handled the Facebook, Instagram, website, YouTube, all of that. And in addition to creating the graphics for the events and whatnot. And I did it all, for the most part, being bedbound because of my other illnesses. And over time, I built the skill of creating content with a higher turnover because I had so much time due to pain to be creative, to the point where the creative director was like, hey, we'd love to have you on board. And that's how I got discovered. And so to that effect, had that individual had just seen my, story and assumed that, oh, she can't possibly fill this role, I had the proof of concept. The proof was in the pudding. And so being able to navigate that space creatively is what enabled me to be effective. But a lot of times organizations will have this response, well, this is the way we've always done it. Or we've got to do it this way because it's easier. Or we don't want to say yes to that because we got to go through 5 layers of chain of command. And I'm always like, I don't care how long it takes. Let's just get it done. So the value of a lived experience is a PhD in my book, because no one can fill those shoes. Nobody can take the course that life has given you. Nobody can take Chronic Pain 101 for you. Nobody can take, vestibular migraine 432. Nobody can take spina bifida 700. You navigate all of those things, and people invalidate it because it doesn't have academia behind it. But my argument is that life is the best teacher you could ever have.
Hi, Maya. The whole theme today has been getting people to tell their stories. So I'd love to hear about your podcast, because I think that would really be helpful towards accomplishing that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So in December of 2020, I was navigating one of the worst bouts of chronic migraine disease known as hemiplegic migraine. This variation of chronic migraine disease is probably the worst because it causes you to be paralyzed on one side of the body, in addition to navigating head pain, vertigo, nausea, and the long list of symptoms that comes with it. So I was laying there just chilling, frustrated, crying, all those things that normal people would do when they process pain. And I remember, because my faith is my foundation, we talked about foundation, and I remember having the inclination to be like, man, I'm just done. Like, I don't see how I can be used for whatever I'm called to. And I remember God telling me, are you going to allow this to make you better or bitter? And so right then and there, with one side of my body paralyzed, I had one free hand. So my thing is, if I ain't got something, I'll use the other thing, People with disabilities are the original innovators because we adapt in a heartbeat. And so I did the graphic design work for the podcast, and I let it sit because I invalidated myself. We talked about that, internalized ableism, for a few months. And then it was really interesting because my mentor, Roy Dockery, who spoke a bit earlier, just was like, hey, how's the podcast going? And it's always helpful when you have people who keep you accountable. And so that was kind of my nudge, like, get on it. This is obviously important. So I remember setting up my camera in my dorm room, and I'm, like, critiquing everything because I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm like, oh, this isn't this, and this isn't that. And then I just hit record, and I just started talking, and I shared my reason for starting, like I just shared with you all, and the impact of recognizing that whatever I lack can be accommodated well over in abundance by God. I just have to step out of my own way. And so that was the first episode, and that was March of last year. And I'm still kicking. The podcast is called Better Not Bitter, and I feature anybody, regardless of race or whatever, on the podcast who has a disability, medical condition, chronic illness, and what have you. And I've had people on my podcast, like, individual by the name of Dr. Karen from the EPIC Foundation, which is a foundation out of Chicago that, is called EPIC, for empowering people with invisible chronic illness. I've had, friends like Billy. He's eventually going to be a guest. I've had other individuals that I met through DSB. I just feel very blessed. Other people with albinism. So navigating this space and being able to essentially allow people to have their stories amplified. Because my goal was to put humanity back into disability. Because for too long, it's been taken out of disability. And we have hundreds of years of proof of how people with disabilities weren't viewed as humans. And don't be black and have a disability. You were definitely not human. So um, that was my goal, put humanity back in disability, and it's been a blessing because I get to learn so much. And I tell people, like, I'm an advocate within the spaces that I'm also a member of. However, what I will never do is pretend like I know everything about every disability. And I want to always put myself in the position to learn. So even as a person with a disability, we're always learning, whether we're learning from other people, learning from people without disabilities. And so being able to do that provides a space where I can learn and grow, and how I can accommodate others, and how I can communicate in spaces like this where other people often aren't allowed to be in the rooms where it happens.
Thank you. Yes, yes. We, again, what an honor. It has been the wisdom. I'm telling you, if you have not checked out the podcast, please do it. Better, not bitter. You can just, if I can find it, anybody can find it. So check that out. It is an incredible, incredible journey that she's on, and I'm grateful to have her here. And I believe our paths are going to cross again. I am certain of that.